Well, welcome back, folks. Again, it's Al Zuccaro here, and today we are going to be exploring some of the city's past, some of its present, and some of its future with regards to urban green space and the downtown and some of the properties that are at stake right now. As you know, on November 8th, there's going to be a referendum that will decide whether or not to commercialize what has been called, or what is known as, the wildflower site. But it's a bigger question than that, and that is the commercialization of any of the public-owned land along the Intercoastal Waterway. Sitting with me right now is Peter Baronoff. Peter, welcome. Thank you very much for making yourself available. Peter is a businessman. He runs 23 hospitals around the country under the name of Promise Healthcare. He's a former city council member and deputy mayor here in the city of Boca Raton, and was on the council at the time of the acquisition of the wildflower site. So he can bring us perspective that is quite enlightening, with institutional knowledge that I could never give you because I wasn't even in town when that happened. So Peter, thank you for taking the time for coming today.
My pleasure, Al.
With the opening comment that I just made, you know what where the conversation is going. November 8th, we've got the referendum. People are going to be asked for a preference. Basically, it boils down to, do you want a park or do you want a restaurant on the wildflower site? You were there. Could you give us a perspective on how we even acquired that property?
Sure. As most people know, as it's known, the wildflower site had been vacant for quite a while. The site years ago was the famous Wildflower nightclub. Restaurant next door, Maxwell's, was there for years. Many people certainly remember that. And it sat dormant. It was owned by a third-party developer who had a vision for what they wanted to see happen with the property. And that vision wasn't moving in any positive direction. And at the time, an individual came forward that was representing that developer and made a proposal for the city to acquire that property. It appeared at the time, from the standpoint of the residents, that certainly it's sitting dormant and vacant. It certainly doesn't look good. Was an opportunity for the city to acquire it at a very reasonable cost, and we were notified as members of the council by the city manager that it was available, and we decided that we wanted to pursue that opportunity and acquire it.
Now, what year was that?
That was in the, I believe it was approximately 2004-05, in that neighborhood year. And at the time, in our discussions, we had looked at that property, not for it to become commercialized as much as the conversation is now. You know, when you run for city council, one of the famous slogans that most candidates use is, Boca Raton is a great place to live, work, and play.
Right, exactly.
Well, the live, we know, wonderful city, and work, many of us who have businesses here, including I, consider this a great place to operate a business, or certainly in my case, a corporate headquarters. But the play part is important because it's the amenities to the citizen. And the amenities are certainly beach, amenities are recreation uses, whether it be tennis centers, golf courses, which is probably a topic for another day.
Yes.
And also the Intercoastal Waterway, which we know for the special holiday boat parade, people line, people use with their boats. It's just the Intercoastal is amenity. Well, how is that amenity really used? Well, if you're not a boater, you know, you basically got to walk to one of the bridges. You don't see too many people standing on the bridges other than fishing maybe. And, you know, that's questionable with the cars coming by, how safe that is. And then we take a look at, right next to the Boca Resort, our little boat ramp on the other side of Palmetto Park Road. Yep. You know, used by boaters, bringing their boats up and down, limited recreation area. So here was, at least for me, a classic opportunity of using that space, park-like, and probably having an amenity or a refreshment type area, because there's limited places for people to buy food or beverage right near there.
Well, since you've left the council, and in my years that I've been in Boca, it seems like there is an overwhelming desire to overdevelop everything. The downtown, one of the critical issues that's being raised by the petition committee is that the downtown has actually no recreational opportunities for people that live in the downtown. So that live, work, and play issue comes into bearing. The Wildflower site and all of the Intracoastal presents those opportunities. What was the general mood of the consensus of the council at the time that the city chose to acquire the property?
At the time, the mood was that it would be available for all the citizens. It was never going to be where if you weren't going to the restaurant that would be there, you couldn't be on the property. It was supposed to be an area where you could access the waterfront. It was an area where that you could take your family. But it wasn't going to ever be limited to one use with one restaurant, with one parking lot, and you had to cut through the restaurant to get to the walkway.
Yes.
Now, I watched with great interest your interview with James Hendry, and talking about the referendum and the votes that he received, and he actually received more votes than he needed to actually bring us to ballot.
Over twice as many.
Over twice as many. And I believe the citizens certainly should get what they paid for. And I don't believe, just because it's a new council from the past, that you change the direction that the citizens gave you.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting point, because there are people that are attempting to rewrite history. Some people, particularly the Chamber of Commerce, is arguing that it was bought with the intention of commercializing it, and that is not borne out by the public record, and not borne out by your comments here today.
I will tell you, someone who has a business in the town, I support the Chamber in many of its efforts, but in this case, I disagree. This is an amenity. And I applaud the citizens for stepping up. And I applaud James and others in his group for doing that. Because at the time, the play part of live, work, and play really needed to be expanded. And, unfortunately, Al, the trend, and I don't believe it's definitely as a result of the downtown, Ordinance 4035 was the ordinance that protected the downtown and created the CRA.
Yes.
Now, obviously, there's development along Palmetto Park Road. There's development that, quite frankly, there are many people who don't support it. But we want to create a downtown vibrant area. It was always that vision. Heights are being respected. And that's always been a controversial issue. But the issue of having access to the beach, the Intercoastal, this is an important property, and I really believe the park-like approach should be adhered to, because that's what the citizens wanted then, and I don't believe the council, just because elected, should change. And I also believe that, I've lived west, I've lived east. I lived in a country club community. Now I live in a residential community near the water. And there are many different ways of life in any city. We have a council today where, quite frankly, none of them really, other than one, live near the water. And, they live in the country club communities, 4 out of the 5. And certainly, this type of amenity one has to recognize, because the play piece has to be for all citizens.
Yes. I have, we're coming to the end of the interview. You said earlier that we raised the question of the golf courses, and we have a lot of issues with regards to Boca Chica and the municipal course. I'd love to have you come back and we can explore those opportunities as well. You may be following this debate that's going on between the city and the Beach and Park District. There is a lot that the institutional knowledge that you have is incredible, and I'd love to be able to invite you back to do this again.
I'd love to do it, Al. When I was there, I I helped create the first meeting between the beach and parks and the city. There should be more, and I'd be more than happy to talk about another amenity, the golf course. Thanks, Al.
Thank you very much for coming. Folks, that is an incredible interview. I want to thank Mr. Baronoff for coming here. And the next interview when we get back from break will be with current council member Jeremy Rogers. We'll get his take and his perspective on this issue as well. Thank you. We'll be right back.